unser Bildungssystem hat.
Our educational system has never produced educated, let alone democratic citizens. Never. All the people who shouted Heil Hitler, who embraced and supported Stalinism, communism, or any other inhuman ideology.
Begrüßt und gefördert haben.
All these people were schooled and supposedly educated, like we are today.
Und angeblich gebildet.
This begs the question of what education is.
Was ist überhaupt Bildung? Ich bin Michael Hüter.
My name is Michael Hüter. I'm a historian with a focus on the history of childhood. Author, publisher, and father of three. First and foremost, however, I'm concerned about the future of our children.
Wollen wir so weit?
Do we really want to continue living the way we do? Do we want to continue treating and socializing children the way we do?
Wollen wir das beibehalten?
There's hardly anyone who is truly happy anymore, and most people complain about what our society has come to.
Aber alle krankhaften
Ultimately, however, all pathological phenomena can be traced back to childhood.
dieses Bewusstsein
Timeless truth that has been lost on us, especially here in the Western and industrialized countries.
Ländern vollkommen verloren gegangen. Wir haben vergessen, dass das
We've forgotten that what we call childhood is a construct, a fiction, which at some point in history, childhood was, after all, invented.
diese Abgrenzung.
It is this demarcation of childhood from everything else that, quote unquote, allows us to justify the fact that we treat children differently, even mistreat them.
Dürfen unter Anführungszeichen.
We continually do things with children that we wouldn't do with adults.
Die wir zum Teil mit Erwachsenen nicht tun würden. Das ist ja einer der ganz großen.
The conviction that children must be educated and that if a child isn't educated, nothing will become of the child, is one of the world's grand narratives and myths, one which the Western world in particular has successfully created and constructed over the last 400 years. That constitutes an encroachment.
Das ist Übergriff. Nahezu jedes.
Almost every child is born highly gifted and healthy. Indeed, only about 0.2% of all children are afflicted with so-called genetic defects.
Jedes Kind.
Every child comes into the world with the ability to love, with the ability to empathize.
Auf die Welt.
Essentially, the offspring populating this world are Nelson Mandelas and Mahatma Gandhis, and not Hitlers and Stalins.
Stalins. Wir erziehen.
We raise children to do one thing above all, to obey.
Aber in den letzten Jahren.
But over the last 120 years, the greatest crimes of humanity were ones of civil obedience,
Gehorsam.
not of civil disobedience.
Ungehorsam passiert. Was leben wir eigentlich unseren Kindern vor?
What kind of role model are we really for our children? This is a pressing question we should all be asking ourselves. Today it's COVID, tomorrow it's the Ukraine. Whatever it is, there appears to be a call to arms from all sides on the political spectrum. Indeed, it appears that we've learned nothing from history, especially this generation.
Diese Generation jetzt.
If we want peace, then we should set an example for our children of how to peacefully coexist.
Miteinander vorleben.
Children, after all, are human beings.
Ist Mensch.
And any nightmare experience during childhood will invariably re-emerge some 20 to 30 years later as a nightmare for humankind.
Sehr geehrtes Publikum,
Dear listeners,
noch nie,
never before,
noch nie in der
never before in the entire history of mankind have children had so few opportunities to grow up in a bond, in a relationship with those who are by nature emotionally close to them. This is a historical fact.
Ein historisches Novum.
It's also a historical novelty on whose devastating consequences for nature,
welche
culture, and society we can't even begin to predict.
die Gesellschaft noch weiter mit sich ziehen wird.
We're being separated. In the Western world, we grow up in separation and division from an early age.
Jetzt werden wir von dem getrennt,
At first, we're separated from what every child, every human being needs,
braucht.
our parents. Next, we're kept separate from the public, namely for 18 years around the clock.
Rund die Uhr. Was wir da
This produces people who are deeply damaged.
zutiefst beschädigt sind.
These people have never been able to develop a self.
Und diese
They've also internalized this separation and division to the extent that they can't help but separate and divide again later.
zu spalten. Und wenn wir aus
If we want to break this cycle of destruction and capitalism, communism, all these ideologies are all fictions.
das sind Fiktionen, das sind
They're invented orders that will always lead to destruction.
alle immer wieder auf Zerstörung hinauslaufen.
If we want to break this cycle, then we have to again socialize our children completely differently. For that to happen, we'll have to, for once, model values such as respect and dignity for them.
Vorlieben.
Wenn wir wollen,
If we want to prevent the present and collective nightmare of childhood from turning into yet another nightmare for mankind, we don't need to do anything other than to remember and to let the world's newly born children once again grow up in love.
Begleitend wachsen zu lassen.